working from home during COVID, we decided to create this monthly event called the Journey to Inclusiveness, Getting There Together. And so we've had some really great speakers from our community and surrounding talk to us in these events. And I'm so grateful for all of you being here today. And I'm particularly grateful to my friend and kind of co-worker, Winston Minix with the Grand Prairie Independent School District. He has graciously accepted to be our guest speaker today, and I know you all know that. And I'm going to introduce him with his bio real quick. The format of this is Winston's going to share his story, and then of course, you know, I'm sure that we'll have lots of questions, or we may. And so I guess, Winston, along the way, would you rather them hold them to the end or ask you along the way?
We can hold them till the end.
Okay, wonderful. All right. Well, I will go ahead and introduce our speaker today. Winston Minix is the Executive Director of Career and Technical Education for Grand Prairie ISD. He works very closely with area superintendents, Executive Director of College Readiness, the Executive Director of Counseling, and all secondary principals to support students and teachers in CTE pathways and courses. He implemented the initial internship program for GPISD in 2012, the senior project in 2012, and the junior job shadowing program. He is also responsible for the revising of our CTE advisory board, establishing the advisory committee, developing our first annual CTE scholarship opportunities, establishing our CTE action team, and producing our first CTE action plan. His largest successful initiative was to increase the business relationships and involvement from 0 to over 150 business partners. Prior to Grand Prairie ISD, Winston served as the coordinator of internships and CTE teacher for Spring ISD in Texas and Clayton County Public Schools in Georgia. In 2020, he's serving as a board of director for the Grand Prairie Chamber of Commerce, board member for Interlink, member of National Career Academy Coalition. He's a member of the Texas Association of School Administrators, a member of the National Alliance of Black School Educators, and a member of the Career and Technical Education of North Texas Administrators. I almost got there. So with all that, I can't even believe he has time to speak to us today. But I want to thank him and welcome Winston Minix. Winston, go right ahead.
Thank you so much, Michelle. I want to also thank the Chamber for even asking me to even be a part of this wonderful, wonderful opportunity to share our journeys. You know, when I got the email from Michelle, I had to think about it because normally I'm a very behind the scenes person. And so to share my journey and to go into part of what's become now is very intimate. And so I am honored to share that today. And so thank you again to the Chamber for this opportunity. To give just a little bit of my history, I am from a city that you may know just south of us, which is Houston, Texas. I was born and raised in Missouri City. I am a product of Fort Bend Independent School District, which is south, and it's completely growing. Now when I go back home or I go back to that area, I mean, it's just, I don't remember a lot of things there because it's just forever changing and evolving. As I was a student at Willow Ridge High School, I was an average student. I was a student that I really didn't know what was next for me after high school. I kind of got through, you know, from freshman to junior to sophomore to junior year. And I really didn't have a complete focus, you know, as I kind of moved up along the different grade levels. But I was a part of different organizations. I was a part of the marching band. So I learned a lot of discipline. I learned a lot of culture just being there. Willow Ridge was primarily African-American high school, a lot of minorities. And so I learned a lot from just being there. I then graduated and decided to go to Lamar University. You'll find out a little later that I did complete my bachelor's degree at Lamar, but also my parents are both graduates of Lamar University. My mom has a chemistry degree, and my dad has a degree in education and a master's degree in education. And both of them are graduates of Lamar University. I started there. My plan was to start there and be an engineer because my mother wanted me to go down that line of engineering. I had a lot of cousins and friends who were already engineers. And that was something that my mom had her eye on for me. But I will tell you shortly, after being part of thermodynamics and circuits and boards and organic chemistry, engineering was not where I wanted to stay. When I first got into the Port Arthur, Beaumont area, and that's called the Golden Triangle, I started working for a locally owned bank. And a good friend of mine, her name is Karen Tran, and we're still friends. Years, have passed, but we're still friends. She shared with me a new degree plan at Lamar at that time, and it was in the College of Business, and it was called Management Information Systems. And so at that time, very early on, I decided to change gears from engineering to go into business and go into management information systems. And so I talked to my advisor and I made that change to that degree plan and worked through it. And it was something that I really, truly loved, especially working at a bank and then being a part of the business school of business. And so as I started working in the banking field, I want to kind of shape or paint the picture of the area at that time. So if you're not familiar with the Golden Triangle, it's very southeast Texas, very close to, Jasper, Orange, very close to the line of Louisiana, Lake Charles area. And during that time, my dad was an assistant superintendent in Port Arthur Independent School District. My mom was the director of the laboratory over at a hospital in that area, but she also served as a vice president of the school board for Port Arthur Independent School District. And so, as you can see, early on, education was infused very closely in my family. During that time, right before I graduated, the board in that time was deciding to integrate two schools that had been segregated. It was Lincoln, the Lincoln High School, which was an all minority school, was going to integrate with what they call Memorial High School and Port Arthur Independent School District. But during that time, they were completely segregated. And so that wanted to kind of paint the picture, during that time frame. As I started to go to college, and I worked alongside of the locally owned bank, I started out as a teller. And for me, that was extremely fun because it was completely different than I ever worked in before. Starting college as a freshman, not to say that it was not a good thing to work for, a retail store or fast food, but I felt like working in a bank was going to give me that professional lens that I needed at the time. And I started off as a teller. Working as a teller, I got to meet a lot of different people, got to meet a lot of different business folks in the community. The branch that we were located at was extremely busy. I learned very, very fast. I made some mistakes, of course you do in being a teller. Back then, a lot of the banking system was not online as it is now. So a lot of things had to be done by hand. So I learned a whole lot doing that. But I'll tell you, I started to kind of get a first sense of things happening at this bank. When I would leave for lunch and come back, we had these little nameplates that would go up on your wall next to where you were the teller. And every time I would come from lunch, I would always find my nameplate in the trash. And for a while, I used to always leave and come back thinking, oh my God, I just accidentally knocked my nameplate over in the trash. And come to find out what was happening just from another coworker and just kind of seeing some things were a few of the women who had worked as tellers there for years. They were taking my nameplate and throwing it in the trash every time I would leave as a sign of, we just don't really like you here with us. And that was really hard for me during that time because, being young, being in college, I didn't really understand necessarily all that went around that. And that happened for a few times, and I decided, well, maybe I can look into another department within the bank. And so what I did was I decided to look at another department called the item processing department. And what that department was, it was a department where, you know, in banking system, there's a cash in, cash out, basically deposits that you deposited was a cash in ticket, and you put the amount as a teller and you hit the cash in button, and money that you sent out, there was a cash out ticket and you put the amount and you cashed out, where all of those documents were collected from the tellers and went to the processing department. And so I quickly decided that, you know, I've gotten the skill set of being a teller. Let me go into the processing department. In that department, all you did was 10 key by touch, and you processed and balanced work. And I loved it. And the reason I loved it is because all you had to do is put your headphones on. You had to talk to anybody. You just processed all the way through. And I learned a lot just being in that department and balancing basically all the transactions that happened throughout all the branches came to that department. And so that was just a great department to be in. Shortly after being in that department for about a year or so, because of my degree in management information systems, I decided to go into the IT department, which made sense at that bank. And so I decided to go into the IT department. I started out as a one-man show as a help desk. So when anyone was locked out of their system or locked out of this software, I was the person that they called, and I would unlock them. I would just make sure our network system was flowing correctly, and all of these different things involved in the IT department. And I gained a lot of experience, especially alongside with me learning about the business infrastructure side with being the management information systems in that degree, and what all that entailed. As I started to gain more knowledge, I started to share information that I learned at the college level to my position. And I had a boss there, and I'll never forget her. I had a conversation with her and shared with her that I needed to, you know, take some time for lunch. Because during that time, as you kind of get towards your junior and senior level, there's not a whole lot of, or during that time, there was not a whole lot of options for more of your advanced courses. And so I was taking courses, an actual IT course that was during the lunch period time frame, and it was the only course or only time frame that I could take it. And I shared with her that I needed to have a little bit of extra time during lunch, and she was fine with that for a while. And then what had happened, because I would have to drive to school, take the class, and then drive back, what had happened was I was, you know, obviously coming back a little later, you know, for a series of times. And so she pulled me aside and she said, Winston, she said, I'm noticing that you're coming from lunch a little later. What's going on? And so I finally shared with her that I was working on my bachelor's degree in business, and I was taking a class during my lunchtime. And I knew during that time there were other colleagues there that, you know, it was a lot of flexibility that I could see that was happening. And she shared with me, she said, well, Winston, you know, we love you here. We love you in our department, but you're going to have to make a decision and a choice. You're going to have to decide if going to school is more important than your job here in the IT department. And so, you know, that was a very, very hard pill for me to swallow at that time, because I felt like it would really benefit, you know, the organization if I worked on my degree, especially being in IT, and be able to have that support system to come back and bring that information, or to at least get an opportunity, you know, within that department. So what I did was I went back and talked to my professor and shared with him at the time that I was having some struggles with getting back to work and some constraints. And he worked it out where I would leave early and he would send me additional assignments so that I could just get through that semester of that course. So finally, I ended up graduating with my bachelor's degree in management information systems from Lamar University. And I still stayed with this locally owned bank. And what I wanted to do was see what opportunities I would have for me to stay there. I'd been there for, you know, 4 years. I had learned at least 3 different departments. I've learned the whole empire. I thought after getting my degree, the next level would be, okay, what would be a great management position for you at that time? During that time, there were a lot of friends that I had went to school with that were in the manager trainee program to become branch managers. And they had that whole training there for, you know, young professionals to go through that. So I had inquired about going through that, and I found out that they no longer had that opportunity available. So I talked to my mom, and many folks who know or have met my mom, she is just completely, you know, she wants me to push the limit. So she said, Winston, I think it's important that you make a meeting, put a meeting together with the CEO and let him know your constraints and some of the things that you're having to deal with after graduating as a young professional. So I did just that. I gotten on the calendar of the CEO. I met with him and I shared with him, you know, all of the departments that I've been through, how long, my loyalty with the bank, and all of these areas. And I shared with him, you know, my wish and my vision would be to be a branch manager and to work for the bank. And he shared with me that they no longer did that program, and he offered me, in essence, to apply for a new accounts position. And what I knew at that time is that it didn't take or require a degree to be a new accounts representative. And so I took what he said, and I was able to kind of go off and continue in the same department I was in. Shortly after that, I realized that everything that I would do as far as a mistake in prior time, that would just be either a slap on the wrist or a conversation, I was getting written up for every single thing I was doing. And so for me, I felt like it was time for me to go, which was hard because I started there after graduating high school. I've been there all through college, and it was just hard, but I knew it was time for me to go at that time. A good friend of mine was in a manager trainees program for Hertz Local Edition. And Hertz Local Edition was not like your normal rental car Hertz. Hertz Local Edition was a piece of the Hertz organization where if you had a car accident and you had an insurance claim, they specialize in making sure that you got the rentals that you need. And during that time, I thought, oh, wow, I love cars. I love working with people. I think that would be my next step. And, you know, in my early 20s and making a transition, you know, I thought, okay, this is it. So I decided to go and work for Hertz Local Edition. I started out as a manager trainee. I started less than a year. I was promoted to assistant branch manager in the Houston area of one of their branches. And then shortly after that, I was promoted to branch manager of 2 branches, one in the Baytown area, and then also one in the Houston area. And so, of course, being in, you know, in my early to mid 20s, I was excited. I was a branch manager during that time in Hertz. You know, the branch managers had the option of driving all Hertz vehicles. They just had to trade them out every 3 days for revenue. And so needless to say, I had, you know, a new car every 3 days. And I was just thrilled and excited. I learned a lot there. I helped develop many others that were assistant branch managers and manager trainees. It was a numbers game. Obviously, it's a business. And I learned the rules to it very quickly in order to maximize their profits. And, you know, it was just easy selling and enjoyed it. I remember many of us branch managers being invited to a ceremony dinner to celebrate some of the profits that the branches were making. And I'll never forget, we were at the aquarium downtown Houston, and the district regional managers were all there. And we were all kind of, you know, having a light finger foods before the actual event started. And I remember the regional director, who was he was over my boss. He was my boss's boss. And he came up to me and he shook my hand. He did not know my name specifically, but he knew the revenue that the branches were bringing in, and he knew the branch numbers. At that time, it made me feel a certain way because I'm a very personable type of person. And when I was approached by him, I felt like he really knew the numbers and I was just the number. I didn't feel like it was a personal type of relationship. And I felt like I didn't know if Hertz was where I really, really, truly wanted to be. I knew, and I told myself very early on, Winston, you can't just jump from career to career. And I felt like that's what I was starting off doing. I had to think about it, and I told myself, and I remember having this talk with myself, Winston, what are two industries that you feel that you would be successful as a minority in? And the two industries that popped out for me was education and healthcare. And so quickly on, I decided that I wanted to maybe go into the educational experience and that career path. A good friend of mine was on the school board for Spring ISD, and he shared with me that Spring ISD was starting a new program for secondary students called software engineering, where students would have to learn Oracle 9SI coding, which was a database programming language. And I didn't know anything about coding or database programming language. I just knew IT for business. And I told myself, I said, well, you know, I've been surrounded by education all my life. And I knew that that was probably something that I would sort of like, but not really sure specifically, and didn't know if I really wanted to go into education. So I interviewed for the position and got the position. It was my first teaching career opportunity. Never been a teacher before, so I had to go and get certified through alternative certification. And so I went and got certified through UNT. I did it in less than a year. Actually, they give you 3 years to do it. And I was just so excited about being a teacher. That's all I could think about. They flew me out to California, and I went to UCLA for 2 weeks to learn about Oracle in order to bring that curriculum back to the district. And that was really exciting to just kind of meet other teachers who would be teaching the same thing across the nation. And this was my first teaching position, first time at UCLA, meeting other professionals who were going to teach Oracle. And it was just kind of like getting thrown into this, you know, just not necessarily a fire, but just getting thrown right into it and just kind of having to navigate. And it was an extremely, just a great feeling. And so I started to teach. I remember my assistant principal pulling me aside and said, Winston, you are taking this way too seriously. You need to take time for yourself. He said, I've seen you here till early mornings, till all the way till the janitors are in the building. And you are putting way too much stress on yourself, because I was really trying to make sure that I made a difference. What I started to realize and tell myself, and even through that conversation with that assistant principal, was that what was going to be important for me as an educator is not necessarily the subject at hand that they were going to get. It was what they were going to take from what I taught them that they were going to use when they left me. And that was what was important. What I realized is that a lot of the students didn't even know how to put a resume together. And so at that point, that's when I started honing in on saying, you know what, I can teach them Oracle 9SI and do a great job, but will they really remember that programming language, or will they really remember putting their first resume together and taking that information to move on in their life as they left high school? And so I started to focus on that. During that time, the school district was building a brand new career high school called Carl Winchie Senior High School. And this high school was supposed to allow students to be in a career academy setting where their English, math, science, social studies were all in one part of the building, and all of their career courses were in another part, but they all worked together to make sure that that student went there with a career focus, but also the other core content would get the same understanding and work with that student. This building opened in 2005. And they had 3 positions available called internship coordinators. And so I felt like I was so just passionate about student resumes and interviewing and working with industry and business at that time that I went out for one of those 3 positions. I interviewed and I received one of those positions. And so under that umbrella, I worked with at least 11 different pathways, and part of my job was to work with 4 different chambers, because Spring ISD was a part of Humble, it was a part of North Texas, Woodlands, several different areas. And so at that point, I got an opportunity to work with 4 different chambers to drum up opportunities for students to get internship opportunities, and then to also work with students on senior projects that they would present to industry folks to kind of be a culminating capstone project for them while they went to that school. And at this time, I'm, sort of in my late 20s. I'm in a new role called an internship coordinator that has never been created in the district before. So it was like the three of us working from a blank canvas. I'm having to be put out in front of several different audiences to explain different things. And, at this time I was extremely shy to speak in front of crowds. And so a lot of that I had to kind of get out of. We had a great CTE director at that time who was just like the Energizer Bunny, and she pushed us nonstop. And so a lot of what I've learned today has come from that experience of working alongside of that whole team. I realized for me being so young at that time, it was just different. It was different than being in a classroom. The classroom, you kind of create, your lesson plans and you just kind of focus what's going on in a room. Whereas when you're kind of outside of that classroom and you're working with the whole campus, there's a lot of different things happening at once. I mean, it's, you have autonomy to do this, that, and the other. And at that time, I don't know if I was necessarily ready for all of that. And I did the best that I could. I wanted to change gears. I think I was going through, again, a point in my life where I felt like, I've been doing this job for about 5 years. I wanted to seek other opportunities, and I just wanted to change gears. And so I found out that there were some openings in the Georgia area. I wanted to make a complete move out of Texas and just kind of start new again and try to use the skills that I had obtained and learned to go in a whole different educational system. And I decided that summer that I was going to go out and spend some time in Georgia to really get to understand the Atlanta area. And if I landed an opportunity that I would stay and I wouldn't renew my contract in the Spring ISD area. So I went there thinking I was going to take a vacation just to see what it was like, not necessarily making the big leap. And I ended up interviewing and getting 2 contract proposals from DeKalb County schools and Clayton County Public Schools in Georgia. And I decided to go with Clayton County Public Schools. And I will tell you, just a game changer. For me, coming from Spring ISD, from Carl Winchie Senior High School, it was a brand new school. It had one-to-one capabilities, and this is the school in Texas. When I went to Georgia to Lovejoy High School in Clayton County, this was an urban school that didn't have the money for new technology, that didn't have all the bells and whistles. The kids had showed a lot of pride in their school, but after high school, they didn't have much thought into what was next for them. And so for me, coming in as a fairly young teacher, but had been teaching for 5 years, I started out at Lovejoy. I think the students learned really quick that I had been teaching for a while and that I wasn't, you just couldn't pull the wolves over me. And very early on, I had a respect for the students. I taught engineering, I taught technology, which was considered engineering there. And just to give you an idea, very old building, you can smell, some of the smell of an older building that's set for a while. They still had, bugs. And I mean, it was just a very, very old building. The students didn't have their own one-to-one devices. I had to put 3 children to 1 workstation and be able to kind of manipulate the room to work with them, to give each other turns on working on different projects that we had. And the good thing was I had been teaching for a while, so I wasn't the type of teacher to put students on their projects and their lessons and sit down. I was all up in their business. I was going from station to station and, and just kind of really putting myself out there, which they really loved. And I think that was just a different feel for them. But I had come from a different state and did things differently. By that time, they had me mentoring other teachers that had been there, kind of sharing some of the things that, we used to do in Texas and all of those things. So I was mentoring other teachers and new teachers that were coming aboard. But I would love to share one story that really hit with me, that humbled me as a teacher, and it caused me to look at things a little different, as far as, you know, the way in which we are very, very fortunate. By this time, students had gained a strong respect for me and my expectations in the classroom. And so I had a student, I'll never forget his name. His name was Aaron. I had a little office that was inside of the classroom, and he walked in my office. He said, "Mr. Minix, can I talk to you?" And one thing that I noticed with high school students is, you know, you never want to really put them on the spot. And so, especially with something that's personal or whatever. So we went into my little office, and he shared with me, he said, "Mr. Minix, I don't have your homework." And I said, "Okay, Aaron, why don't you have my homework?" And he said, "I don't have your homework because, Mr. Minix, Mom, we got evicted from our home." And for me, that early on in my education career, coming from a more affluent school, I didn't see that or identify with that as closely. And so he said, "You know, the bus pulled up and all of our stuff was sitting on a curb." And again, I've never seen that even in Texas, but I know in Georgia, they will put your stuff out there. And he walked out of my office, but before he walked out, he said, "I'll make sure I have it to you." I said, "Absolutely, Aaron." But when he walked out of my office, I just busted out in tears because I just, you know, we take a lot for granted. And that was my first experience in dealing with that. And so I put myself together really quick because, you know, class had to start. And so I put myself together, and, you know, we got through class. Aaron got through my class, but it just showed me a more appreciation for students like Aaron. And so that has always stuck with me. During that time in Georgia, they were going through a decrease in funding for education during 2008. The whole state could not, the education funding just disappeared. And so they were going through some hardships, to the point where not only were school districts penalized, they started to furlough teachers. And so my mom called me and she said, "I know what's going on out there in Georgia, and I know you're having a great time and, you know, you're exploring." She said, "But I think it's time for you to come home." And I said, "You know, I think you're right." And so I decided to start interviewing for positions back in Texas. And I wasn't really sure at that time if I wanted to go to back to Houston, or if I wanted to go to Austin, or if I wanted to go even to Grand Prairie. But quickly, I started interviewing, and I interviewed for Mansfield, I interviewed for Arlington ISD, and I interviewed for Grand Prairie. And I'll never forget, I interviewed with Vicki Villarreal, who's the principal of DeBisky at that time. I interviewed with the CTE director at that time, Jim Ziegler. And we spoke over the phone. I shared with them my PowerPoint presentation over the things I had done over the course of my teaching career. And immediately they said, "I don't know who all you interviewed with, but we want to go ahead and offer you a contract." And so I accepted, and I flew to Grand Prairie, and I started being the engineering teacher for the second year DeBisky was open, and was very excited about that. When I got to DeBisky, I realized very quickly it started to feel like Carwinchie, that beautiful new building, one-to-one opportunities to career focus. And so I felt like I was back at home. And so when I started teaching, Jim Ziegler pulled me aside because he knew when I interviewed that I had some experience with internships. And at that time, they promised the students internship opportunities. And I lended a little bit of my expertise of what I knew. And I told him, I said, "Mr. Ziegler, you know, this is what worked in Spring ISD. I know there's a lot of different things that, you know, geographically, cultural, there's just a lot of different avenues here in Grand Prairie." And he said, "Well, let's just kind of put everything down on paper." And, you know, we started to kind of look at some ideas. Shortly after that, he retired. and a new director came in the position, and I was able to work with that new director. I shared with her my knowledge and my expertise, and we got moving forward. And so I'll never forget, I had 3 handbooks that I kept with me. They were the internship handbook, they were the job shadowing handbook, and there was a handbook for employers to work with interns. And I started to work through those handbooks and develop what worked best for Grand Prairie. And so I remember working in my parents' home in their library, and I was putting all these different pieces together. My mom was like, "What in the Lord are you working on?" But I was so passionate about internships. I was just kind of making everything kind of make sense. And then I shared all of that to central office. And I remember at that time, the executive director of secondary had shared it with the teaching and learning English team and various departments. And I got it back and it had all this red writing over it. And I said, okay, I need to go back to the drawing board and redo this again. And so I did just that. And to now we have our internship handbook, our job shadowing handbook. And I don't think we use our employer book as much because we do a whole onboarding for them a little differently. Things have expanded. And so those were the stories of the handbooks. The next thing that I needed to do is I needed to get in the community. And so I met someone who was just passionate, very in your face person. And she went by the name of Lynn McGinley. And she was at the time the president and CEO of the chamber. And I shared with her my vision and my thoughts of where internships could go. And I shared with her a few other ideas as well. And she said, "Oh my God," she said, I would love to help you and assist you to make some of these things happen." She said, "I think this would be a great partnership between the chamber and the school district." And so, long story short, we were able to work together, which was challenging at some times. We gotten so close that we would just tell each other off and just keep it moving, but that was just the relationship that we had. And we worked very closely together and made some great things happen for students, opened the doors for the community and the city. She put me in the front and center so that I can, meet the mayor, the city manager, and just kind of share with them some of the visions that we saw in the CT department. Shortly after that, she asked me to sit on the board for the chamber, which I was honored. I used to always go into that chamber building and look at all the pictures around that room and say, "Wow, what do you have to do to get on that? Get on the wall?" And so when she started to open those doors for me, I was extremely honored. And it has just been, the rest has just been history. Shortly after that, I became the coordinator, the very first coordinator for the CT department. And it allowed me to continue to work towards creating a great internship program. But there were a lot of other pieces that needed to happen in the CT department, such as creating the advisory board, creating an action team. The action team, the way that happened was because at the time, there was just a perception that everything just happened at the Biskie. You had these great CT teachers at South Grand Prairie. You had great CT teachers at Grand Prairie High School and all over the district. And they just felt like a redheaded stepchild against the Biskie CTE teachers. And so the action team created a platform so that we could have representation from all over the district, and they could feel like they had a piece of the vision. And we met once a month. And the biggest piece of that was for them to be at the table just to hear what were the new ideas and then feel like they could make an impact. And so that kind of stuck. And, today we still have the action team. That's just a representation of all the voices across the district. The advisory board is a group of industry and community members that come together to share their vision and give their expertise of the latest and greatest that needs to happen in our programs. And that's a monthly meeting. And that advisory board has been so instrumental for us to move forward. And the creation of that and the longevity of it is just makes my heart warm, when I speak about that. After that, I got another boss, and this boss was very instrumental because he actually had a finance background. And for many years, I'd always known and understood the instructional side of CTE, but not really could break down the financial side. And he taught me that. He did teach me that. He worked with me. He built my knowledge as far as understanding the financial pieces that help support and expand the CTE department to where it is today. And during that time, I was working on my master's degree and got a master's in education, technology education from Texas A&M Commerce. And then a year after that, I became the director of CTE. During that time, the program has expanded. Internships, from when I started way back when in 2009 to where they are today, have grown from just a 60 student pilot to just last year over 800 students across the DFW Metroplex. When you speak about people on board to give internship opportunities, when I started, I only had 12 people that I knew from Lynn, to now well over 150 internship providers across the DFW Metroplex. Many of them are competitors of each other, and they're like, well, if they got a Nabisco student or if they have a Grand Prairie High student, I want one too. And that's just been the competitiveness across the board on that. And so things have just stretched and expanded to beyond my thought and focus. Along that way were some very instrumental board members. Dr. Hull was a very visionary as a superintendent throughout the beginning of my career. Now Ms. Ellis, just very forward thinking and innovative leaders who have allowed me to do the great things that I have been able to do. That's not always the case in other districts. And I have a lot of counterparts in other districts that have some struggles. And so the synergy with the city, our chamber, our school district has afforded a lot of what is seen today in our CTE program. And so I can't take all of the credit for that. That certain people had to be in certain seats in order to make that synergy happen. I will say, coming from a small area in Houston, country boy, going from that to working at a locally owned bank that has taught me so much. Going from that and working at a Hertz, being able to motivate students in Spring ISD, and coming to Grand Prairie. It's been a long journey, but it's been very worthwhile because I've impacted so many people and students. Very rewarding. What I will tell you, what I failed to share, is that at my high school, at Willow Ridge High School, I was in a co-op program. I worked at ExxonMobil my junior and senior year, which allowed me to work at a bank. And that bank paid for my college. And so for me, I'm a product of being an intern student, a part of a DECA program, and to see it come full circle is just rewarding for me. And so that's what allows me to come to work every day, because people were there for me, and I want to be there for the students of Grand Prairie Independent School District. So with that, I'm Winston Minix, Executive Director of CTE for Grand Prairie Independent School District. Thank you.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for sharing with us, Winston. I mean, I don't know about anybody else on the call. I see Dr. Mathis too. Thank you so much for sharing. Man, we hit the jackpot. We on all levels, for our community, for our chamber, and for the members here today. I mean, thank you so much for kind of sharing things that are so private and so personal. I'm sure there are other people who have questions, but I just also want to say how fortunate you were, because for your parents, I feel like even though they let you do your thing, it seemed like you had fantastic role models. You know, would you agree? I mean,
Oh,
it pushed
absolutely.
you and made you feel like you are worthy and you can ask for what you need, and that you don't stand back. And you know what? And the other thing that I gathered from this, Winston, is that the negative in the world that you ran into, you know what? It was sort of like, well, that door is difficult to open. Psh, I don't need that door. I'm gonna go do something even better. And I mean, so that's just the beginning. Just the beginning of what I got from this. Anybody have questions or comments? You unmute yourself. You're all muted right now.
Hi, I'm Jamie Brown with Thompson Pike Group. We are a manufacturing company located here in Grand Prairie. We're at I-30 in MacArthur. And Winston, thank you for sharing your story. Certainly very impactful. We certainly appreciate you doing that, because obviously is a lot of personal information you send, as you're a private person, as many of us are, so that's difficult to do. But I did want to ask you, particularly for our company, we would love to partner with CTE students. I actually have a background working in education. I was with Cedar Hill ISD. Prior to that, I was not an educator. I worked in administration. So I have an affection for CTE and for educators, of course. But wanted to know how we could work together. Obviously, being in manufacturing and working with large product, it's difficult to bring students out here due to safety issues and OSHA. But for people who are in our position but still very much want to partner, both with students and perhaps their parents, because we are always hiring at various levels as well. So we hire everybody from general labor to front office staff to engineers. And we just need help getting started. So what would you recommend we do?
Oh, absolutely, Jamie. Thank you for sharing that. We would love to set something up where our students get that opportunity. I will share with you, you mentioned manufacturing. We have students that are currently working with Holt Caterpillar, and we're in our 6th year we're working with Holt Caterpillar, and they work with heavy machinery. And I would love to kind of share sort of their process. Obviously, we're working with, over 150 different businesses. They all look differently, and we can customize. And so I have a team. We would love to meet with you and kind of share some of our paperwork and some of the stories and talks to see where we can actually plug in. So I will be definitely in touch with you and get your information from Michelle.
Yeah, I can connect you guys for sure.
Absolutely.
Michelle?
Yes.
Can I just add a comment?
Yeah, go right ahead.
I learned a lot from you today, Mr. Minix. And hearing your passion and seeing how you are emotionally tied to this helps me understand that our career and technical programs have grown exponentially under his leadership. He's a little humble about that. I don't know that he takes quite enough credit, but thank you, Mr. Minix, for what you've done for all of the kids in Grand Prairie, beginning in elementary school at more preparatory, that a lot of them just can't wait to get there, and they get that opportunity beginning in their later elementary years. Thank you for what you do, and I'm very thankful for the relationships that you've built with the city and with the community. Every one of those have added opportunities for our kids. So, Mr. Minix, thank you.
So one question I had for you, Winston, was you mentioned the story with Aaron, and you clearly were providing something that they didn't have there, where they were hungry. It felt like to me, based on your story, that they were hungry for these new things and your method of teaching and being connected with them. So how hard was it? I know you had to look out for yourself and you were trying to further your career, but how hard was it for you to leave Georgia? knowing that there was a school full of students that were hungry for that?
That's a great question, Michelle, and it was extremely hard. I think in any job that you do, if you're extremely passionate about it and connected, it's hard to leave. I'll tell you, there's times when I do go back to Atlanta just to visit, but on the weekend, I would actually I've been to Lovejoy and park my car and walk around and just kind of feel that it brings me back to that time again. Because I do miss that place. I do the same thing in Houston when I'm around Carl Winchy. I'll park the car and just walk around and just kind of remember things back during that time. But it was extremely hard. During that time, being a young educator, you don't know what you don't know sometimes. And so I was just doing what I thought was best for them and helping them connect the dots a little bit better. I think because I was also a young teacher, I dressed, very, with the latest fashions. They were always kind of just, trying to, like a magnet. And so, but it was extremely fun. A lot of students, and it wasn't all minority students. I had a variety of, it was very diverse student population there. And I connected with all of them.
Yeah, I think just personally, when I was in high school, I lived in Illinois, and we did for my social sciences class, I spent a day in an inner city high school, and it was just amazing. I was from a northwest suburb of Chicago, and so, we had bright, newish building and everything you needed, and it was just amazing. We all had, it was back before IDs were hanging on everybody's neck like they are today. And so when you went to that inner city school, me and another student, we had to get passes to hang around our neck because different things happened in that inner city school. And I think that, and I'm sure you'd agree, that your experience with just the difference in Georgia to Texas, whether good or bad, whatever the case, talk about expanding your vision and your understanding of people and the possibilities of people and environments, and understanding that things aren't always, it's nothing's a given, and I also wanted to say too, that I am certain that even though he left the room and you cried, that just you being there and listening to him and having that understanding during that class, I'm sure you have impacted him over the years far more than you ever know.
Oh, I'm sure. That was a moment for me that I would never forget. But I will tell you, as you mentioned about the previous school I had worked for in Georgia, we take a whole lot for granted. I will tell you, everybody wants the best class, the smartest students, everything to be as seamless as possible. After having the opportunity at Lovejoy High School, I feel like I can go into any environment. I really, truly tested my teaching ability. And, just being and having to coach teachers currently that are CTE teachers. And, a lot of times, they always want the best of the best and think they need it all the time. But I'm here to tell them it's interesting how creative you can be with less. And that it's just goes that way sometimes. You can be extremely creative with less and get just the best, instruction possible. And so that, all I had was what I had, and we made the best of it. And so I've learned a lot from that.
Did anybody else have any comments today? Yeah, Prudence. You're muted, Prudence. Hold on a sec.
What year was it you came to Grand Prairie?
It was in between 2009 and 2010. DeBisky had just opened in 2009. I started in 2010.
Because I remember when I first met you, our leadership class from 2007, 2008, the majority of us spoke at Career Day at DeBisky, and that's whenever I first met you. And it was very interesting to see the interaction you had with the students. So I can tell they respected you very much. So that was really cool. See, I remember that from back then.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Prudence.
Sure.
And it's good to see you.
It's good to see you.
And I think one thing that you really bring to everything that you do, Winston, is your enthusiasm and your passion. I mean, clearly through your stories, and how could it not be infectious and inspiring to the students and obviously in even the instructors that you're helping to. So I hope that always stays alive in you, because it's fantastic.
I appreciate that, Michelle.
Does anyone else have any other comments, questions? Yes, Matthew.
Well, Winston, thanks for sharing your story, man. I'm very honored to call you a friend. Appreciate everything you do, and I noticed there's a number of educators in this meeting, and I want to thank all of the educators. You guys do a phenomenal job. I'm a product of public education, so you know, I think you guys know how I feel about education and how much I'm involved in trying to give back to the GPISD. And again, I just want to thank you all for doing what you do. You guys are awesome.
Thank you so much, Matt.
All right. Anybody else have anything they'd like to add before we conclude?
Well, I did want to say that I wish you did get your engineering degree, because I got my engineering degree.
No,
but I'm not doing engineering at all.
Hey, do you still stay in touch, or did you stay in touch with Aaron after you left?
No, I didn't. I didn't.
You're supposed to tell us you did.
I know.
Well,
Engineer. No, I'm kidding.
but you can still see the impact that he had on you, and I am positive you had such an impact on him, as Michelle mentioned. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you so much, and I hope so.
All right. Well, if there are no other comments, I just want to thank you again, Winston. Thanks so much for sharing. I wouldn't have wanted to be anywhere else today at 2 o'clock, so I'm so pleased. And I want to thank you all so much for joining us. And we have more to the series coming. We don't know who our speakers are, but it's going to be hard to top Mr. Minix now. But anyway, appreciate everything that you do, Winston, and all of our GPISD people and all of our business members that are on the call with us today. So again, I want to thank you for joining us here at the Chamber with Winston Minix from GPISD.
Thank you. Thank you.